another Disney remake? They're not even trying anymore.
Oh my god, is that a bloody cow?
It's so gruesome.
Oh, they killed Lucky.
Gotta be a dream sequence.
Oh, man. How did they go there? What's the point of this? We knew she's demented from the animated version. What's the point of remaking this again?
Welcome to Parley With the Pack, where we give our opinions on everything from movies to music. In today's video, we'll be looking at, you guessed it, remakes. What makes them good, bad, or I guess just plain old. So Tammy, what was up with that remaking the Cruella trailer again? It seemed like a cross between the original Cruella and like Harley Quinn or something. Pretty uncalled for.
Well, even though they've told the story of 101 Dalmatians before, maybe it will be a different story. Apparently there are only 7 different stories being retold over and over again. What draws me to different stories is the character. If the plot is the same, what else would attract someone to the story? And not everyone is going to agree or disagree with the same actions I do. I guess the settings could change, but the character is more important.
No, that reminds me of the story of Sleeping Beauty. I mean, the Disney story.
Wait, spoiler alert.
Oh, whoops. I totally forgot about that. Thanks, Tammy. Just for everyone who's not aware, we'll actually be spoiling a lot of different shows in this, so watch out. Disney actually came up with a live-action adaptation of Sleeping Beauty called Maleficent with Angelina Jolie, the one of the Beauty Fairy. Oh man, that was different. Sleeping Beauty was told from the Princess Aurora's perspective, versus Maleficent that was told from the fairy's perspective. That makes for a huge change. For one thing, in Sleeping Beauty, Stefan, I remember, is the good king, and he's the one who gave his Aurora to Prince Philip. But in Maleficent, Stefan is an evil king who has a whole backstory with Maleficent. He falls out of love with her, takes her wings, and spurns her, which is what makes her vengeful in the first. So I guess this difference in motivation is really what makes Maleficent worthwhile. Remember, it wasn't boring to watch, even after seeing the original. It's kind of like that time when you're younger and you got in an argument with your brother or sister. Obviously, we both know there's always their fault, but your parents would have to listen to both of your stories just getting a sense of what happened. Same kind of difference in perspective. In fact, I think that Philip doesn't even meet Aurora until like halfway through Maleficent, let alone save her. Just talk about redoing a fairy tale ending there.
An adaptation is meant to retell a story in a different way, whether it's changing the medium from a book, movie, or video game, or change the point of view. But the main story should be the same. Take Avatar: The Last Airbender, for example. People were very frustrated when they whitewashed a big portion of the cast. Some argue we don't complain about Nick Fury from the MCU or I Am Legend's characters being turned into African Americans, but part of Avatar: The Last Airbender's premise was that they were from different tribes, and obviously in the show they're of Inuit or Asian descent. And Avatar: The Last Airbender isn't even Japanese, so you can't say the cartoon was modeling Asian culture. Nick Fury and I Am Legend's characters' races weren't important to the story. The Avatar: The Last Airbender movie also changed the pronunciation of the characters' names so they'd be more realistic. Sokka was pronounced Soka and Aang was pronounced Ong. However, why make the names more realistic but not the characters playing them?
Yeah, I also agree that being faithful is important, but I think it really depends on the importance of the detail being changed in the adaptation. For example, lots of films, TV shows, what have you, cut out a lot of the character just to make things more concise or for just for practical reasons. We could spend a long time talking about what should be cut out or not. But I think it really depends on the story itself. As you point out, for example, with Avatar: The Last Airbender, or with Marvel, for example.
I wish I'd seen Avatar: The Last Airbender the cartoon first, though. If I'd never seen the actual cartoon, I would have thought Shyamalan's version was what actually happened in the story, which is not only unfinished, but the inferior version. The cartoon is better, and since it's a finished story, I consider it what truly happened. But I wonder if Shyamalan had finished the story, if I'd consider his the original. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is an example of the remake story ending first. Because the movie finished first, the ending is cemented, his tale is complete. These are two comics from the original Scott Pilgrim vs. the World series. Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life was published in 2004, the same year the script was handed to Edgar Wright, who decided to make the film. The first draft of the film was published when comic 4 out of 6 was out. O'Malley states that the film's ending was the film's work, suggesting it's two different works. This is true because the comic book ending had nothing to do with the ending of the film. In the movie, Scott fights Gideon and ends up dealing with his inner demons. It's a simple plot where he ends up fighting the bad guy, getting a bit of help from his friends, and learning lessons along the way. In the comic, Gideon has the power of trapping people in their minds with their psychological problems. He ends up trapping Ramona in hers and takes over, but Scott uses the trapping power on Gideon, allowing Ramona and him to escape and defeat Gideon. The mind control aspect of the story was in the comic from book 1, but it's never alluded to in the movie. I even find the final comic wasn't enough to explain the complex mind control story, or why comic Gideon was freezing his past girlfriends. Thus, the movie has a functional plot that works, but the complex ending of the comics seems too quickly rushed and confusing, which being the second ending of Scott Pilgrim goes against my expectations.
Yep, I generally agree with you well with the original. If the adaptation finishes first, well, that's it. It came first. But what's canon brought that up. I think that's more interesting. I mean, for anyone out there who's writing fanfiction, you wouldn't normally consider that canon. But how come? With franchises like Scott Pilgrim, it's pretty easy for the audience to decide what's canon, since the author basically declares the film to an alternate ending. But it's not so simple in other cases, I think. For example, let's take a TV show instead. Say Game of Thrones, that's a good example. Now, honestly, unless you're living in a book 2 years ago, you ought to at least remember. Season 6 of Game of Thrones, when the show completely overtook the book series it was adapted. But the show didn't just surpass it, remember? It actually retold the original story pretty differently. That was just done to offer different characters' perspectives which improved the story. There were likely huge differences in the characters and the endings in the books. For example, in the books, a large part of Sansa's story from her happens to be for a different character. There's an actual Aegon Targaryen who's not Jon Snow. And Dany, well, she's actually completely non-violent, as of yet. These are huge. And what's more, the books did actually start before the show. Some could argue, I think, that the show is not canon. Personally, I also think it's the viewer's choice to decide this. Besides, even the author, George R. R. Martin, made changes to the story since he started writing the books. Get this, did you actually know, Tammy, that there was originally supposed to be a love triangle between Jon, Tyrion, and Arya in the books? Honestly, when I heard that, I was just mind-blown.
Pretty much George R. R. Martin could change the direction of it at any time, since that's what he did when scrapping the whole love triangle idea. As a consumer, though, I'd ultimately choose what's canon because I'm the one experiencing the story, just as you might think a song of Ice and Fire is more canon because that's your preferred way of experiencing the story. Maybe it's not a question of canon at all, just what's more enjoyable to us and what makes most sense. In a similar way, if I read a story, I might envision the characters differently than someone else. I've both read the Harry Potter books and seen the movies. Since the movie version is more tangible than my imaginative version from reading the books, the characters portrayed in the movie are more real to me and canon.
Huh. Well, I don't know if I feel the same, to be honest. I got way more into the Harry Potter books growing up since they just came out first. I remember watching the first few movies and just thinking so many times, things are so off. I can remember Hagrid being a lot shorter in the movie than what I imagined a half-giant to be, or them not really explaining Percy Weasley's backstory that well. I guess those details don't really matter much, but character portrayals do. After all, characters are the ones we relate to. For example, take Ron and Hermione. In Harry Potter, they become a couple by the end. The directors didn't really happen when they originally casted Emma Watson and Rupert Grint. because the author, J.K. Rowling, just hadn't decided it. Even though they play their characters really well individually, it was just so awkward seeing their romantic interactions because they just had no chemistry. Like, look at that. Where did that come from? According to the two of them, they felt more like siblings than a couple. It's not a huge deal because it wasn't a critical part of the story, but I think it just goes to show that everybody has their own interpretation of characters, ranging from the authors to the actors to us. On the other hand, Dumbledore is a character that many people consider to be pivotal to the series. He's really, really important to get. The original actor, Richard Harris, said that he approached the character as somebody who has patience and childlike warmth. But when he passed away, Michael Gambon was the one who had to take over the role. And, well, he just came up with a really different interpretation. Let's just say that. For example, there's a scene in Goblet of Fire where Gambon in the movie behaves a lot differently than Dumbledore in the book. In the book, Dumbledore is really calm about it. Here's how he reads.
"Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry?" Dumbledore asked calmly.
But in the movie,
Harry, I protest! Harry, you put your name in the Goblet of Fire.
according to Gambon, he never read the book, so I guess he was completely basing the character off the script. I guess in his defense, he said that he didn't really read them because he didn't want to be disappointed and what would be taken out of the books later to fit the film. So I suppose it wasn't his fault. Maybe it was the screenwriter's fault. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Nobody really knows, and according to Gambon, he was going off his interpretation. So I guess he could do whatever he wanted. Who knows?
The way a character is portrayed is probably to make them more relatable to the audience. I find Hollywood always has to doctor their characters so they're more relatable than, say, a story from a different country. There's a movie, Dinner for Schmucks, with Steve Carell and Paul Rudd. Now, most people are probably familiar with the Steve Carell version and less familiar with the original, Dîner pour les cons. The protagonists in both stories differ in the sense that I like the protagonist in Dinner for Schmucks, but the protagonist in Dîner pour les cons is a real jerk. The premise of the story is that Tim, Pierre in the French version, attends his boss's dinners, where each guest is supposed to bring the dumbest person they can find. In the Hollywood version, Tim is disgusted by the idea, but he wants to play along so his boss will give him a promotion and he can impress his fiancée. He's even considered not attending until his idiot falls right in front of him, or rather his car. In Dîner pour les cons, Pierre has no objections to the dinner at all. Pierre's idiot, like Tim's, makes his life miserable, but for Pierre, it's more like karma. I guess having characters differ based on the area the story is portrayed in is a form of censorship, making them more relatable depending on where the character is from. This form of censorship is seen a lot in movies and shows that are adapted for different countries. Although harmless, I don't think it's necessary. Censorship is meant to protect people from damage or taking offense. It should not place the consumer in a certain way just for the sake of controlling them. For example, censorship for familiarity or propaganda. Sailor Moon is one example of a show that has a lot of censorship in the American version. It caters to American audience perspectives about relationships in a way the original Japanese version doesn't. I could go on and on about censorship in Sailor Moon, but for now I'll focus on its application to conditioned children. For example, there's the vilification of homosexuality. Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune are originally lovers, but they make them out to be cousins in the American version. This has led to a lot of scenes that either had to be deleted or taken out of context. When Sailor Neptune is talking about her first kiss, we have a cutaway to a silhouette supposedly of Neptune's first kiss. Originally I saw this with Neptune and Uranus, just silhouetted so you couldn't tell it was them. But on closer inspection, I see it's Sailor Moon and most likely Darien. Neptune doesn't have the short hair you can see in the silhouette for the woman. The fact that they are cousins makes several of the scenes between the two scouts very awkward. Depending on how old you are, colorful mists, cheery music, and gazing into each other's eyes while gently touching each other's fingertips is going to look like a romantic relationship, and probably confuse more youths than instructing them on a proper relationship. Personally, in my opinion, incest is worse than a homosexual relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Censorship and adaptation is only meant to cut out content that's offensive, not just anything the audience can't relate to. Like, doing that would be unfaithful to the original. That said, I think, Henry, there are lots of examples of censorship that's done for the right reasons. Like, say, Game of Thrones, come back to that. Young characters' ages in Game of Thrones were changed in the show to make sure that there's no risk of criminally underage portrayals. Like, Dany is 13 in the books, but I remember in the show she's actually 16. It's a small change, but it matters. And in fact, I guess you could argue that the graphic scenes in the show could have been removed altogether in that case, but well, that's just another whole can of worms.
Speaking of which, that's about all the time we have for now. But we're not done with remakes yet. We still want to get into how remakes succeed in entertaining after all.
Do you agree with our thoughts? Be sure to leave a comment below and like, subscribe, and share our video.
Yeah, and we also invite you to join Parley With the Pack on our future videos. Connect with us and be part of the pack too, you know.
But why would they want to connect with us? They don't even know us.
Oh, that's true. I totally forgot. We didn't even introduce ourselves yet. Well, I'm White Wolf.
And I'm Grey Wolf, and this has been Parley with the Pack.